Hey, Diane, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. When I first saw your bio, I thought, wow, this is a story that I think every business owner kind of dreams about. 50 million of revenue in 6 years is an amazing accomplishment. Tell us a bit about the company.
My first company that we're talking about, that's the one everybody wants to hear about. That was the biggest one. It was a super niche staffing agency. So we specialized in, and I'm not sure if you have title insurance in Australia. I think you do. It's really specific, and it's the people who do technical searches when you're buying a property. So it was a very super specific niche staffing agency.
Cool. And so when did you start the business?
1996.
96. Okay, cool. So the internet was just coming about. Things were starting to happen. I remember it clearly, unfortunately. It makes me feel a bit old, but
yes.
So you started this thing in the back of your house.
That's correct. I wasn't in that house before we started it, but the clients who we thought were going to be our first clients were in Pasadena in California, near LA. And we thought that's where our main clients were going to be. And so rented a house in that area. That was the idea. It didn't turn out that way, but that was the idea.
Yeah, cool. And you started this on your own?
I started it with my husband. Yeah, my then husband.
Yeah.
I started it. I quit my job and started it, and then he came on board very quickly after that.
Excellent. And what led you to doing this? I mean, was your background in this sort of technical area?
No, not at all. And my background, actually, I had temped. So back then you call it temp, but I had worked as a temporary secretary receptionist during college and graduate school. So I had that. I knew how that looked or how that business worked. And my father was in title insurance. He was an executive at a title insurance company. And I always believe, Simon, that when you create a business, I'm a big believer in the why and what your goals are. Yeah. And so our goal was to start a business and see if we could build it and sell it and retire, which is what we did. Yeah. We ended up getting divorced. So that's a whole other story. After the exit.
But that's fascinating. So you started the business ultimately with the end in mind, and selling was the ultimate objective from day one?
It was. That was in our original business plan. Yes. Yeah,
great. It's not as common as I'd like to think, where people are starting with the end game in mind and building towards that goal. And obviously there's always a winding road, right? We like to think business is a straight line, and it never really sort of turns out like that.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about the business and how did you grow it in such an amazing sort of fast pace?
Well, the funny thing is about what you just said. So people, when we were selling it, would say things to us like, it's like you won the lottery. We're like, no, it was actually that we made a plan to do this, and we executed on the plan, and it actually, for a multitude of reasons, it happened. So it was planning from the beginning, but not over planning. We got a book, the actual book back then, called How to Start a Temp Agency for Dummies. That series of books, and we basically followed the steps.
Yeah,
with a lot of winding roads. It was not that easy.
Yeah, look, and you need to contextualize anything like that. But I mean, I love the idea that you had a plan, you did some research, you pulled it together, and you started executing. And no doubt, you jumped all over the place and put out fires and dealt with a lot of stuff on the way, I imagine.
Well, the main thing was executing, because throughout the whole business, throughout those years, so many people would say to us, "Oh, I had that idea too," or and we're like, "Okay, well, we're the ones in this." In this house, and we eventually moved to offices, and we had several offices around the United States. But it's so much not. I mean, it was a good idea, and it was a really good timing for what we were doing in the market. But also, it was hugely, as you know, on all about the execution.
And were there any sort of, I mean, it sounded like a great idea, the timing was there, but was there any sort of period through that beginning phases, beginning years maybe, where you kind of weren't sure or you were questioning? Did you ever doubt that you were going to hit the plan?
Oh, there were times. There were times that at the beginning, once I remember my then husband's said, if someone offered us $100,000 right now, I would sell this. And I got so mad. I'm like, what? We got this huge fight. And I'm like, no, and I think that goes to show, I was actually speaking at an event earlier today, and I now this is bringing it up in my mind, because it's like, you just, you once you start the business, like you have this idea, and then all of a sudden you have a business. And then there becomes a certain stage that I think is very common for founders, that all you want to do is not have this business anymore.
Yeah. I think it's different perspectives, right? Looking from the inside out and having to deal with all the kind of minutiae that comes along with a business, right?
Yes.
Interesting. And so how many staff did you have in the end?
Oh, we had thousands. We had, if
Wow.
we think about it, so we got to the point where our weekly revenue was $1 million a week, and our typical bill rate was about $40 an hour per person. So
Okay.
so for our temp staff, and internally, I think we had about 50 people internally. We had offices around the United States.
Yeah. Okay. So 50 kind of technical employees, but then representing thousands of people out there who were looking for work.
Well, as we built our team, we brought in co-founders, what you call them today, co-founders, but we brought in basically partners who bought into the company. So they took executive roles. And then we hired managers in different offices, and then we hired recruiters and salespeople. And then we had the people out there who were actually doing the contracting work.
Yeah, interesting. And so the model was all temping. It was, and I imagine, you have people for set contracts and things like that, do you? Or is it, is it just literally ad hoc stuff, or how did that sort of work?
So we really started by the seat of our pants and did not know anything. I mean, and again, like to the point of the people who said, oh, I had that idea. I mean, we talked to people who are like, oh, I want to start my own agency too, but I need to get the experience. And we're like, what? Like we had no experience. So now I'm forgetting your original question.
Oh, no, I was just curious about the type of work, and, you're obviously putting people out there in temp work and stuff like that. Is it, I see a lot of recruitment businesses out there these days, and some of them are focused on permanent recruitment, and some of them are focused on more sort of contract work.
Yes.
And it seems that while the permanent stuff is great for cash flow for a lot of businesses, the ongoing repetitive nature of some of these contracts tends to make those businesses quite attractive to acquirers.
Yeah, you can't.
Did you find that?
Oh, 100%. In fact, I was just working with a tech staffing company with the goal of helping them to create their contracting division, which we did. And I mean, brought on, like one contractor was worth $5 million of recurring revenue. And then, and then you stack, I mean, you could just see the difference of, and they had originally started a year before I started my first company in 96, and are still building and growing. So it 100%, you can't really, I think it's difficult to exit a direct hire company unless you really are, like Corn Ferry status, because otherwise it's highly profitable, and it's a lot less stress. I mean, when you have contractors and they're employees, and you're paying into their taxes and health insurance, and there's a lot of different and there's, especially in the States, there's a lot of different lawsuits that there's a lot of, it's very complicated, and margins can be thin. But when you put people on contract, sometimes it's a set period of time, but other times they stay, like they become part of, really part of the workflow, and then you keep adding people on. So it's really, that's how you build in recruitment. That's how you build a scalable business to exit.
And so, I think one of the things many business owners would be asking is how do you drive to that sort of level of revenue? I mean, I think so many people in many businesses, pick an industry, doesn't matter. They all seem to have these kind of ceilings or hurdles that people struggle to get over certain revenue levels, and whether it's 2, 5, 10, then 20, and so forth. 50 million is a solid business. So I guess I imagine a lot of listeners would be interested to know, like, how do you drive to such a high level of revenue in such a short period of time?
Well, there's a lot of different factors that go into it. One is timing and product market fit, and the kind of business you create. Look, when I work with entrepreneurs now, and when we talk about the decisions that they're making early on in the business, you have to decide what your goal is. And that's why I do believe in knowing your end game at the end. You'll hear a lot of people say, don't think about the exit. I don't really believe in that, because I think that if you there are millions of different ways to start a business, from a local bakery, to a VC-backed company that is going to be a unicorn. So when you ask that question, how to get to $50 million, you have to have a revenue. You have to have a model that can actually scale to get you that money.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And as when you started the business, did you, and obviously you have the end game in mind, did you have a number that, in terms of value that you were trying to drive towards?
No, I did not expect it to get as big as it did.
Yeah. So as you approached it towards the sort of, latter years, year 5, I mean, you must have been sort of thinking, you're getting towards this amazing point. Mm-hmm. What was your sort of thought? What did you think the business was worth back then?
Well, we hired an investment banker to broker the deal. So, I mean, I think we got pretty much what we thought it would be. And the deal was $28 million. So when you have $50 million in revenue, it's not, there's EBITDA and all that stuff. So it was, so I think we got pretty fair. We had a deal before that, and I know you're familiar with this because you talk on this is your niche, is exiting. But what our accountant had said to us, the deal is going to fall through 6 times before it goes through. And and that was true. And then we also knew, though, that if both parties really want it to happen, it will happen. But we did have an exit planned before that at year 5 that fell through because their team was here doing diligence when the trade towers were hit at 9/11.
Yeah, right.
And that deal, that fell apart. And so but it ended up, the deal that we did end up doing was more beneficial to us in the long run.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. Well, 9/11, I guess, like Corona, like the coronavirus, it's COVID-19. There's these pivotal events, I guess, that change the world, and obviously business follows suit, right? Yeah. Out of interest, so $28 million is, a fabulous outcome in most people's books. So just curious in terms of what was the sort of methodology they used to come up with that number? Like, was it a multiple of EBITDA or revenue, or just, broadly, what was the sort of methodology they used? It
was a multiple of EBITDA. And if we hadn't had, and I have in other exits, I mean, I've done everything from using an investment banker to use a yellow notepad and call everybody I knew to tell them that I'm selling this thing. But I think if we were not as anxious to make it happen, and you're nodding your head because you know what I'm going to say, we would have ended up with more. We were so many times where we were like, well, just say yes. And he was pushing back. And it is so interesting. If you think about at the early stage of a startup, when you're counting every single penny, and then at that stage, fast forward, if you do get to the point that you're going to exit, you're like ready to, leave $5 million on the table because you get the thing done.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. How long did it take? Like from your first kind of, the first time you guys sat down and as a group said, okay, hey, like we've got a potential buyer or, we're going to start going down this path. Mm-hmm. How long did it take from that kind of moment roughly to when you had actually settled and closed the deal and, had some money in the bank?
Yeah, it took about over a year because, first we had that one deal that fell apart. So that was, that was a whole process. That's when we hired the investment banker. They wrote the book. We talked to several different entities who were interested, from everything from PE firms to strategic buyers. So we went through that whole process, and then the deal fell apart. And then we decided, and then it was 9/11. So we decided, okay, we are actually going to go heads down and build this more. So we kind of decided this isn't the time to sell. And we thought, so we were pivoting to the strategy of buying other companies. We decided this would be a good time to acquire. And so we hired someone to come in and do it for us. The first call he made to a business broker, he said, no, but I think I know a company that might be interested in buying you. So my next 10 months in my role in the company, I was working on the deal. So it took about 10 months from that call to actually closing the deal.
Yeah, interesting. And I think anybody who's been through a deal will relate to what you're saying. And for those who haven't, share with us a little bit, like how much time and effort goes in on your behalf? I mean, obviously you have a day job, right? You are a busy, successful entrepreneur. You're doing stuff. And now you've got this entire new process sort of going on in your world, which, how did you find that from a timing, commitment, emotional sort of perspective?
Well, we had a team, but we had a strong executive team, and we had an operator who was running the day-to-day part of the business. So I really had to. I made that my full-time job. I mean, I had started another company while we had that company, and then I brought in a team to run that, and that was a software company, so the like early days of internet. But I really, honestly, I didn't do much else, and even with the investment bankers, I've done deals later on that I didn't. I guess, most of them, it took a lot of time. It's so many documents. I have a photo, an old photo of the conference table of the files that you actually had to sign. It's entire, I don't know how many files, but it was a lot of work.
Do you know, it's kind of funny saying all that because you do a due diligence and you're right, there's so many documents, there's so many things to do. And of course, I imagine there wasn't really these kind of digital online in the cloud data rooms then, right? So I would love to see that photo of all those documents. I can imagine.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I can just imagine every now and again when I'm, feeling frustrated, or the team's feeling frustrated about pulling together an online in the cloud data room, I'll show them the photo and go, hey, it could be worse.
Yeah, it was so fun though. We knew it was at the end of it.
Yeah.
I could not complain at all.
Yeah, well, I guess it's light at the end of the tunnel, right? That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And after you, what happened when you sort of struck the deal? Did you have to hang around for a while afterwards? What did that sort of look like in that transitionary phase?
Well, we had, and I strongly believe when you're building your team, that everybody has to have a strong motivation why they're part of the company. You'll hear people say that you need somebody who shares your passion or your vision. I don't believe that, because I don't think anyone, if they're not the founder or the original founder, they are not going to be as passionate about your business as you are. I just don't believe that. It would be very rare. So we found some, because we knew our goal was for that company to get out and retire. We wanted to retire in our 30s. So we found our first One of our first like co-founder or partner who he came in, he bought in. His goal was to be the CEO of a publicly traded staffing company. So all of our goals, we had different goals, but the business was a vehicle to get us all to our goals. So that's what happened. So we brought him in. He ended up staying. We stayed for a little bit, but you know how it goes. You don't really like advise for long, or that doesn't really, it never works.
Yeah. You can't have too many chiefs, right?
Yeah.
Interesting, but I love that concept that and I, by the way, I totally agree with you. I mean, nobody's going to come in and have the same level of passion and commitment and focus and objectives as you as the founder. Mm-hmm. But I love this idea that you were able to have multiple stakeholders with very different objectives and goals, mm-hmm. and yet align that enough to work collectively on one core outcome. Mm-hmm. I mean, that in itself can be challenging. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you've settled the business, you've gone on, and since then, of course, because you're early retirement, and so what do? You go and, of course, start some new businesses. So tell us a little bit about those new businesses and where that sort of has led to.
Yeah, this is the part that's going to be my book, and then turned into a movie, a drama.
Oh, look, there's drama everywhere, isn't there?
So if you remember, our goal was to retire and spend time together. We got divorced.
Well, at least you can laugh about it. That's the main thing.
13 years ago, but there were a lot of other. Yeah, then So we started some different. I took over a bit. So while we basically So I made millions in my 20s. I was retired in my 30s. I learned a lot of lessons in my 40s. and now I teach other people how to start, scale, and sell their companies.
Yeah, awesome. And so what sort of clients do you work with these days? Are they typical of a certain industry or size, or what does that generally look like?
So really, the clients who I typically work with they have revenue. So I do work with some tech startups that are pre-revenue and building an app. And so I work with them as well. But I generally work with, companies that are building with revenue. They have anywhere between like $250,000 to $5 million in revenue. That seems to be my sweet spot to help people. Mm-hmm. And one of the common things that we work on is building their team and things that I have learned too on how to scale. It's always with people, right? So, and I've always been in the people business most of the time. I mean, I've worked in candy and marketing and things like that when I've been working with clients. I had a women's fashion business too. That was something I started out after the divorce, and we sold, but that was still about people. I had over 300 women selling the clothing and trunk shows across the country. So, so generally what we work on are things about scaling. And sometimes what I do, it's a combination of coaching and consulting. What I realize is that there's so many coaches out there who haven't actually founded businesses, a lot of startup coaches. And I thought, well, that seemed kind of interesting to me, because you can't really know what it's like to stay up at night and not know if you're going to meet cash flow or deal with people problems and things like that. So it's a combination. Part of it is honestly part of it's like therapy, and part of it is actually consulting on like how to do that thing.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? And I'm glad to hear you say that. One of my great beliefs is that if you haven't had a few sleepless nights wondering whether your business is going to make it or not, you probably haven't been in business. It's just one of those things, and you can describe the path, you can take a photo of the path and the journey, you can map the journey, but unless you have walked the journey, it is pretty hard to sort of explain it to somebody or really advise with that level of depth and sincerity, right?
Yeah. I get two often asked questions, which are really interesting. And one is from coaches, and they'll ask me, Diane, how do I how do I convince startup founders to work with me as a startup coach when I haven't been a founder? So, well, I don't know, I mean, I think there are things that coaches, there's different niches, right? There's mindset. And I think there are fantastic coaches who can help in certain areas that have not been startup founders. But at the same time, I'm like, well, the reason why I did this is because I have that experience. The other thing that people ask me, I was asked this today, I was speaking on scaling building your startup teams. And I got asked, how do you build a team? How do you start hiring people without any money? And if you are, in my opinion, if you are in business, it is about money. Business it's about money. And that's why, part of business is unless you are building something that is a tech company to get market share and you're building a unicorn, but then still you have to get money. You have to get investors, or you have to get revenue. And that's what you need to get people. You cannot do these. This is a business.
Yeah. Yeah, something's got to give, right? You've got to be able to either commit the time and drive the revenue yourself, or somebody gives you the revenue, or, the income, the money to invest in the processes, right?
Yeah, it's so interesting to me, having had that perspective of being a business owner, like before the whole entrepreneur startup was such a thing, so really building it from the perspective of building a business. That just seemed like when I built my first software company, that was in 2000. And we had a consultant come from Silicon Valley who was telling us how it worked and how you build market share and you don't make money, you don't make profit. And I was like, that's not what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And I built a profitable, it was a job board, and it was, I ended up selling that, and that ran for 13 years as a profitable business.
Wow. This is a really strange concept, isn't it? And this idea of building these companies that are not profitable, and then once again, I think there's lots of people who'll be listening who have been around the software tech space and will feel this in their bones. But so many people are running on borrowed time almost. You can't continue to run a business without profits. And certainly unless you're getting lots and lots of ongoing investment, right? But even that sort of starts to tap out for most people, unless apparently you're Uber or Tesla or one of these enormous companies.
And I think that, and I would never tell somebody don't do that, because they might be the next Mark Zuckerberg. I don't know. But there's such a small, it's such a tiny chance that you're going to succeed anyway. And tiny chance that you're going to succeed, that you're going to be a unicorn.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and as we've said, just there's so many hurdles along the way, right? Not just revenue hurdles, but there's so many other challenges in business. If you're not making money, that's an enormous stress to have hanging over your head every day, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's probably right for some people and startup founders in the tech space and all that. And a lot of people are founders, so they found a company, they get investment, that doesn't work, they found another company. That's just not really my space and what I work with.
Yeah, interesting. And so if you've got the benefit of a lot of hindsight here and multiple businesses that you've started, built, and exited. Looking back at your successes, is there anything that your current self would go back and tell yourself in your 20s when you were starting this journey?
When I was starting the journey, I would probably tell myself, I don't know. I think I was pretty good when I was starting it, but I think I learned a lot of self-awareness, because I had I really things work. So I can't say it didn't work with business wise and financially, but personally, I was so obsessed with my business. And in some ways you have to be, but I've learned through the years how to hustle. I love building businesses. I love the hustle. I love the scaling. I love solving those problems. But now I'm able to do it in a way that I can also emotionally detach from it and realize that I am not my business. Now I don't know if my business would have worked though if I had the mentality I do now. But I'm a lot more mellow now. That's for sure.
Yeah, but isn't that such an essential thing? I think we all talk about it in an ideal world, but it's getting to the end of your journey and associating your personality and sense of self-worth to a business can be really detrimental to your mental health, right?
Yeah. Well, look, I did get divorced, and it was my husband and I we were co-founders, and we were together all the time, and we built a lot of things. We built homes. We had 3 kids, and we were so driven and constantly going. And then once we sold it, we were so driven towards that point. And it was very interesting once that happened, and we're kind of left with a lot of money and then that time and ourselves.
Yeah. It's I guess there's a cost on everything, right?
Yeah.
So Diane, I'm going to ask you in a minute to share with us maybe your one tip that other business owners can take away from this. Obviously we have business owners and entrepreneurs who listen to the podcast predominantly. But before we get to your one tip, tell us, how can people get in touch with you? Like, are you happy for people to connect with you on LinkedIn? Is there a website? How do people reach out?
Absolutely. LinkedIn is great. I'm on LinkedIn. Super happy for people to connect with me there. Also on my website is my name.co. So it's Diane Prince .co. And I'm always, I have different programs and things like that. So I'm always updating my website. And currently I'm doing free speed coaching. So when you go to my website, you can see what's available.
Oh, look, that sounds fantastic. And I'm sure there'll be lots of people looking to take you up on that offer. I alone have really been enjoying chatting to you and hearing some of your insights. I think there's always something to be learned there. So, and for those listening too, if you do reach out on LinkedIn, put a little note there saying that you heard Diane on the Buy, Build, Sell podcast. At least she'll know where you're sort of reaching out from and why. It might give her a little bit of context. Just a polite thing to do. But so Diane, one tip. Is there one thing that you would broadly sort of share with the world and tell them to keep, focus on or think about as they're going on their journey?
Yes, there is so much advice out there and so much noise about startups and entrepreneurship and other people sharing about their outward successes. So when you take advice, when you hear advice, filter it. And remember that entrepreneurship is personal and it's exciting, and you're creating the path, only your path. That's what entrepreneurship is. You're creating something totally new. So ignore your competition, look at focus on you, and know what you want out of your business. If you know your own vision and your core values, then you can filter all of that other stuff to stay on your path, because there's a million different decisions that you can make, and each of those decisions is going to affect how you live your life. So once you know, just remember that you can make decisions, and all of the decisions that you make in your business are going to affect how you live your life.
That's some very wise words, Diane, and thank you so much for sharing. I think this message of work out what kind of life you want and then build a business to deliver it is something that the world needs a little more of. So look, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your story. I know so many people will get a lot of value out of this. And as we said, anybody who would like to get in touch with Diane, please reach out on LinkedIn or her website, dianeprince.co. I'm sure she'll be very happy to hear from you. Diane, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Simon.